Hello, we are back from recess, reconvening the budget hearings. I am Ryan Dorsey, member of the Ways and Means Committee, vice chairing, filling in here for Councilman Costello, the chair for the moment. Sorry, I'm just getting situated. Here present from the committee. I see Councilman Robert Stokes, member of the committee, Councilman Councilman Schleifer, member of the committee. Let's see other committee members here. We also have members of the council. Jesse Christopher Burnett here, member of the committee. Other members of the council present. In chambers here, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, online Councilwoman Felicia Porter, and I think that's it at the moment. From various other agencies, Bob Senemy, Budget Director Chris Shorter, Chief Administrative Officer, the city, also from BBMR, Mira Green, from Mayor Scott's office, Natasha Mayhew, from Council President Mosby's office, Nikki Thompson, and Deputy Mayor Ted Carter is on with us. We are here now with the Law Department, represented here in the chambers by City Solicitor Jim Shea and Deputy Solicitor Darnell Ingram. Various other members of the Law Department, Elena DePietro, are online. I'm going to ask that the Solicitor and Deputy Solicitor take it away with their presentation now.
Thank you, Councilman Dorsey. Can you hear me? I'm on. Okay.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Jim. Just I'd be remiss if I did not also acknowledge Comptroller Bill Henry, who's on here with us now. The Comptroller's office is coming up afterward. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Council and members of the committee. Thank you for having us here today. As the chair indicated, I'm Jim Shea, Solicitor, and with me is Darnell Ingram, the Deputy Solicitor, and Darnell will make our presentation today. Both of us obviously are here and available for questions. So Darnell, go ahead.
Thank you, Solicitor Shea. Greetings, council members, as well as members of the committee. We thank you on behalf of the Baltimore City Law Department to be able to present our budget before this honorable committee. With that, I will begin the presentation, and if any questions arise during the presentation, please do not hesitate to let me know. First, we want to talk through our budget request concerning our administration, which is a request for $1.6 million for service number 860, regarding our stewardship of city resources. We're requesting this particular budget because to administer and operate the law department on behalf of the residents and city of Baltimore. This includes the oversight and management of the office, as well as ancillary legal and administrative things that the solicitor or deputy solicitor may be conducting on behalf of the mayor and city council, reviewing of contracts, advocating in the city's interests, for a gambit of areas, including what we're going through currently, which is the pandemic and the operations to support those efforts from a legal and advisory perspective. This year request of $1.6 million also includes an additional request for $78,000 roughly to support the law department and its administration concerning the administrative act regarding ensuring that all agencies are being compliant with our legislation, the Administrative Procedures Act, to ensure that by the end of this calendar year, beginning January, that every agency is ensuring that their regulations and policies and procedures are pursuant to our state and local laws. In addition to, we've requested 2 FTEs for this from a different service line for the service line to include a secretary and a special assistant to support those efforts in the administration of the law department. As I move on to the next slide, controversies. Controversies are litigation in which the city is either defending and or affirmatively litigating, which would include but not limited to labor and employment, general litigation, land use collections, our CBI, which is our investigatory arm concerning workers' comp and any other investigatory matters concerning litigation against the city. And it also includes our new department, which is our environmental law division. We're requesting 8.5 million, which is an increase from the previous year due to this new division of environmental law, where we had to staff 5 positions that transferred from the Department of Public Works. With that, we also had to transfer a budget for several positions to reflect the personnel that we needed for our risk management. We inherited the contract concerning our third-party administrator, in which we needed to acquire the contracts administrator to operate that particular contract. With that, I'll go to our performance measures, our output. If you can see that we are on par from our target from FY20 concerning the percentage of repayment versus the amount negotiated for collections cases. We are on target with that from our for our current fiscal year. And next year, we're targeting to be 105% or more. Our effectiveness, percent of clients rating services good or excellent. As you can see, our target was 90%, and we received a 91% rating for our agencies that we support for the city. And that's for service line 861 concerning controversies and litigation. Next, we go to transactions. This is for service line number 862. We're requesting $2.1 million. And this particular service number is for we're being responsible for the stewardship of the city resources. So with that, we negotiate the city's real estate, economic development opportunities, lending, and municipal finance activities. This also includes the review and negotiations of solicitations and contracts on behalf of the mayor and city council. And finally, we provide advice and opinions to the mayor, city council, and local and city agencies regarding local laws, policies, and procedures concerning the city. Some of our highlights of this particular service line is our outcome for the last fiscal year. The current fiscal year, we did a target of 350 for the number of PI requests handled, and we're closely but almost reached that target. The only reason why we didn't reach it was due to the pandemic, and also we had some transfers of employees into which we had to account for the not meeting that particular target or above that, which goes to our effectiveness of percent of PI requests answered on time, which was concerning the pandemic. Specifically regarding that, we had an employee that we hired to do specific PI requests, but there was a turnover in employment. That individual only worked for the city for 3 weeks, so we had to retool as well as ascertain what particular PI request is out there to ensure that we were effective in answering on time. And so that was the only reason, and also due to the pandemic as well. During that particular time, we've lost some of our technology that we utilized to respond to PI requests. And with this particular line item, we're requesting 2.1 million again. Go to our next line item. Our next service line is 869, which is our Minority and Women Business Opportunity Office. And this is an office that's codified by the Baltimore City Code, which reports to the law department and management of the solicitor, the city solicitor. The responsibility of the Minority and Women's Business Opportunity Office is to oversee the certification of minority and women business, as well as the small and local business enterprises in the city. This particular office investigates, certifies, recertifies, and also determines violations concerning our certifications of our MBEs, WBs, and local and small businesses. This office also interacts with procurement as well as the Board of Estimates during i.e. for procurement, to ensure that goals are set and met for a particular solicitation or contract, and with the Board of Estimates if there are any bid protests concerning a subcontractor's participation in our minority women business and small and local business enterprise certification process. We are asking for $723,000, which is an increase from the previous year, and that's for the transfer of 2 positions that transfer from the Department of Finance, which is i.e. the Bureau of Procurement, to help support the activities to focus more on minority business participation in our city contracts. As you can see, if you look at our outcomes for this current fiscal year, the previous fiscal FY20, as you can see, the number of applications approved, we had a target of 150. We've actually approved 363, which was spectacular due to the efforts of trying to reorganize, restructure the application process. We were able to allow some applications to be applied online, so the process and also to be able to approve them was a lot quicker as well, even though we were going through a pandemic as well as the ransomware attack during FY20. The effectiveness, we had a target of 35, which is the number of days the average applications for review. We targeted for 35, even though we didn't meet the target of 35, but 90, but again, that had to do with the ransomware specifically because our software that we utilized, because we went from paper to be more automated, the ransomware attack really affected the staff in being able to meet this target. In addition to the pandemic, when we had to transfer to staff being teleworking, that had to be a learning curve with that as well. So that was the effect of us not meeting this particular target. But now that we are restructured and we are reorganized and becoming more automated, we feel and believe that we will be meeting our targets moving forward, despite any additional acts of God that the city may encounter. Service number 871 is Police and Legal Affairs. This particular service line provides and handles advice and gives opinion to the Baltimore City Police Department. We defend the Baltimore Police Department in civil litigation in federal and state courts and arbitration. We represent the police department disciplinary proceedings, civil citation hearings, and the like. And we provide legal advice and opinion and contract drafting on behalf of the Baltimore City Police Department, as well as respond to public information requests from the public. As you know, this particular line item of attorneys, they are also overseeing the consent decree to ensure that the city is compliant with the consent decree that our city is obligated to perform. If you look at our outcome and effectiveness, our output and effectiveness, you look at the output, we had a target of 180 regarding the number of misconduct cases resolved. We're about 95% met the target. And again, we had a pandemic as well as ransomware, which did affect some of the litigiousness concerning the misconduct cases, but however, we're back on track and on target to ensure that we meet our target for FY21. Now, effectiveness, percent of cases resolved prior to hearing, we made our target of 90% for this particular service number. And finally, our workers' compensation practice group. This is a practice group that's relatively new to the department, to our particular department. It's been in existence almost 2 years now, and these attorneys, they litigate workers' compensation claims on behalf of the city. And the reason why that we brought it in-house is, one, to save the city money, which we have been able to accomplish in this particular practice group, as well as to be more in line and step with coordinating our efforts with our claims adjusters to ensure that they're giving legal advice and opinions regarding these particular cases to resolve them amicably on behalf of the city in the best interest of the city. If you look at our output for this particular service number, the number of claims handled each year, we had a target for FY20 for 4,000, and we only actually had 3,300. And again, it's speculative as to why we didn't get more cases this year, but you know, we had ransomware in the pandemic, so it's very speculative as to why people didn't file claims, but we do project that now that we're on the tail end, hopefully, God willing, of the pandemic, that these cases will be increasing as well. And our effectiveness, yes or no, this means that our ability to win our cases concerning workers' compensation before the Workers' Compensation Commission. We had a target of wins of 5%. We've actually exceeded our target of successes before the commission of 42%. And also with that, this budget is for $5.8 million, and that's particularly because we inherited $1.2 million as a $1.2 million third-party administrative contract from risk management, and that's for us to manage it more effectively. In addition to, we are also managing the health services contract in which Mercy's contract is, Mercy Hospital is the incumbent, and those particular contracts will be managed and operated and administered by the law department moving forward. With that, that is our presentation concerning our budget request for FY21. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Solicitor. Chairman Costello is back in the chambers here. I also want to acknowledge Christopher Burnett, a member of the committee who's joined us, and as well as Councilman Mark Conway. I'm going to channel Chairman Costello here for a second and point out a couple of these performance measures for the PIA requests. And Chairman Costello can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is kind of up the tree he's been barking up. About the number of PIA requests that the department gets. This is really, it's largely out of the department's hands. This is just if the public happens to make PIA requests. I don't understand how this is necessarily a meaningful performance metric. It's like 311 using the number of times that people call. Although we did hear, I think, a somewhat reasonable explanation as to why that's a performance measure. I think yesterday, but nonetheless, similarly, I thought there was a second metric in here that seemed kind of odd to me. Number of claims handled each year. I mean, I guess this could tell us something about what happens to be happening out there in the world, that events might be avoided somehow, that we end up getting claims, but probably not. I don't think this particularly tells us anything about the performance of the law department. Feel free to disagree. Please.
I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, there's another output measure that I didn't want included because we weren't even applying it uniformly. It was the number of cases handled by litigation. Again, a statistic over which we have no control. From your point of view, you might want to know, to ensure that we're actually working hard enough and are entitled to the money that's in the budget. So I suppose it has utility there. But my review of the performance measures generally for the law department is we can do some substantial upgrading. I think both as to the output and the effectiveness measures, we can do some things that are different and I hope a lot better. I've spent the last 20 or 30 years measuring lawyers' performances in one way or another, and that can be done. I have heard lawyers say, oh, no one can measure what we do, and they're wrong. We can measure it, and we will be looking hard. We've already started discussion with the BBMR about new performance measures for next year.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. I'm sure that Mira Green has noted this comment here as well, as she was doing in the chambers earlier. I'll just ask one other question quickly. and then I will go to members of the committee with their hands raised, and then I'll go to other members of the council. Oh, you mentioned the new environmental law unit within the department. I saw that Paul DeSantis is on here. I'm a big fan of Paul DeSantis. Glad to see him brought over from his very similar, if not almost identical role in the Department of Public Works. As a budgetary question, is there a budgetary savings that the city is to find in moving some of DPW into the law department, what was DPW was doing into the law department, or is DPW still doing some and the law department is doing something different? Is there a division of environmental law roles? And for what was handled with respect to water and wastewater, which I assume could or should justifiably be paid for through water utility funds, is that accounted for in how any related portion of this environmental unit's practice is accounted for?
You want me to answer, or you want to?
Go ahead.
All right. The rationale, I know you have a 3-part aspect.
I've always got many parts.
And I'll probably answer the first 2 and maybe table the 3rd one for Jim, if that's conducive to Jim. But the first 2, to answer your first 2 questions, the rationale for bringing the Environmental Law Division to the Law Department is to have more oversight and management of that particular group to ensure that we're being effective concerning the issues that relate to Baltimore as it relates to environmental, so that the solicitor and also these attorneys can have more collaboration and synergy with the law department to ensure that the attorneys are getting the effective training, continued education, and resources as opposed to what they may have been receiving. Not to give any negative slight to the great work that the Department of Public Works, but having the attorneys in the same department, it will be would and has been more effective for those attorneys. In addition to that particular rationale, the Environmental Law Division, as you rightfully know, and many council members know, there's a lot of equity as it relates to that, and the law department has really been putting a lot of initiative as it relates to some of the inequities from a legal perspective that the city can pursue, albeit through our affirmative litigation group as well as environmental law. So these are some of the great nuggets as to why the Environmental Law Division should and was moved to this particular, to our department. And in reference to the water management, I can answer or Jim, would you want to?
Just real quick before we go to the money thing, is there any legal section remaining at DPW, or is it entirely transferred over to the law department?
All of the issues as relate to environmental laws, the DPW does have an attorney that does their PIA requests and some policy and a little bit of advice and opinions, but most of the environmental related work is in-house for us to have the subject matter expertise in-house, as opposed to general counsel role that many agencies like Department of Health and some other agencies in the city that has a general counsel.
That was a compound question that you asked. I think we've already established that. That's
I'm
not
a compound guy.
Yeah. The 3rd piece had related to water and wastewater issues and how that was split up in the shift of the environmental group. The bottom line is I don't know precisely the answer to that question, and we'll ascertain it for you. But generally speaking, I can say that we're doing an awful lot of work throughout the Department of Law on water and wastewater issues. And it's not necessarily being done by the environmental group. Our contracts review group is looking hard at the series of water billing issues that grew out of an OIG report. We're near the end of an assessment of whether there's any liability on the part of the vendors and consultants. And that we'll be reporting on that soon. Also, I've been personally involved in questions about the true up of water costs between the city and Baltimore County. We've had a number of meetings, and I think we're making progress on that. But again, those issues of water and wastewater go well beyond the environmental implications and into a lot of city business, all of which is within the Department of Law.
I'd be really interested to know if or where any line is being drawn about what is funding that legal work. As you just mentioned, the true up from Baltimore County ratepayers pay more than or close to half of what's in that water utility fund for treated water. And if there's a bunch of litigation and legal research and writing that's happening that's directly related to water utility service, then I'd like to know if it's reasonable for that to be included in the portion of what must be and can only be funded by the water utility fund.
Well, conceptually, your point is completely sound. I'd have to look at the CAM, the cost allocation method, to see to what extent costs like legal costs are included. They probably, I don't know, but it probably has an overall administrative percentage into which the law department would fall. But the question then becomes, is that 10% or whatever it is that sufficient to cover all the costs that should be included?
Yeah, whatever it is if 50% of the cost should and could be footed by county ratepayers, then 100% should not be footed by the city's general fund.
And the law and the agreement between the city and the county is clear. The city is not to operate the water system at a loss.
Thank you. All right, I will go to, as I said, members with their hands raised first. I'll go to Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, mine is more of just a comment. I just want to basically thank Jim, your team for the work that you continue to do. The city has some fine attorneys that work with our committees, and they also they take time and do research, and your agency is one of the agencies that really turn in reports in a timely manner. At least I can say that to with the committee that I chair, that I know that research and time is taken for opinions and reports that are due, and just appreciate the efforts that all of the attorneys do. And I do want to give a particular shout out to Elena DePietro, which has been involved and around for a while, and I know that she works hard on bills and coming to conclusions with truth. And I just wanted to give that encouragement of shout out to her.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. That's terrific. Praise of lawyers is rare, and we accept it.
Oh,
we accept it willingly.
That's definitely truth as well.
Thank you.
But you guys really, help us out in moving things forward in a timely manner. And we have a person from your team, and Aaron works with us, good. So it's all about that communication and working together. And your office does, at least in my eyes, they do show that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other members of the committee with their hands raised. I'm going to go to Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Shea and colleagues on the committee as well. First, wanted to give a shout out to Ms. Gwen Tromley, who was recognized with the Ladinsky Award yesterday. She's in your shop and I know does great work. She's also my constituent, so I'm very proud of her. And so I want to give her a shout out. Also, to my question, I have a couple of questions. One is we continue to hear from constituents about the time it takes to be able to get claims for wastewater backups and that kind of thing through the law department and paid. Are we going to see some improvement in that area this coming fiscal year?
We certainly are striving for that. This has been a difficult year to get things done. But I'm happy to report that we're starting to do what we hadn't been able to do before, which is to make site visits, which was awkward and difficult, and makes the claims adjustment much harder if you're dealing strictly in the abstract. So while it takes a little bit of time to go to the site, it actually expedites things. But that's the kind of performance measure that I think we should be focused on, and we'll be looking to apply.
Yes, I do hope that we get a chance to see that improvement. And I think this was an issue prior to COVID as well. So want to make sure that that
Right.
is brought to your attention. I don't know if anybody's on here from MBEO, but I'm very excited that they're having 2 additional people on to be able to help with compliance and all of the great work that they have been doing. I was curious if there's anybody in that office that speaks Spanish that is able to work with our minority contractors that are Spanish speakers, or do they work with MIMA?
That's a great question, and I can answer that, Councilwoman Ramos. There's no one in the office that speaks, to answer your question directly, there's no one in the office that speaks fluent Spanish. However, we are going through a reorganization to ensure that we are being effective as it relates to the constituents in the constituents that relate and work with our MBEO office. And one thing we have been looking at is the diversity of our staff, and we're to be able to communicate as well as operate with the city and its residents and also the business community. So we'll be looking for that, and thank you for raising that issue with us, and to make sure that we keep it into account as we reorganize and restructure the office.
Yeah, Councilwoman, if I could supplement that. This is a particular focus, and I've asked Deputy Solicitor Ingram to do an assessment top to bottom of MBEO. So it's preliminary to make any comments, but I will say that my impression, which is frankly crystallizing over time, is that we have not put enough resources into MBEO, that similar organizations and agencies in other states and other jurisdictions have more funding, more people, and frankly do more for the minority business community and women business community than we do. And so that's going to be a focus of ours. And the Deputy Solicitor is just at that right now.
Great, that's great news. I have a couple more questions, but I'll yield for anybody else right now.
I don't see anybody else at the moment. Colleagues, is there anybody else that has a question? All right, I'm gonna ask one other. Darnell, I think I heard you mention some staffing needs in order for the implementation of the APA. Can you talk about the needs there and how that's going?
All right. So we are currently undergoing the total assessment of our compliance with the APA. As you are well aware of the requirement that all city agencies should be compliant. Right now, we have identified, I think we identified one individual to help in that. He's leading this efforts within the agency, and we're also assessing the resources that needs to accompany it. And some of the resources may be some temporary support or legal support from students that may have an interest in this area or may need an internship or clerkship. This is going to be a long undertaking. The solicitor already sent out a memo to the city agencies to accomplish it. It's going to be a lot of hand-holding because a lot of the agencies may not have the expertise or the people in-house to be able to ensure that they have the records and or the language necessary to be compliant with the law. And so the undertaking is exhaustive. And so I don't want to make any representations today that it's not a small undertaking. It's actually a large undertaking. So the resources aren't the best. We only were allocated $78,000. However, we think we can utilize the resources that we have with the $78,000, what we have internal to really accomplish this task. And I think we'll be able to do it in an effective manner.
It's Councilman, if I could add, it's tricky. when I first started, I was briefed on this project, which, as you well know, is due to be completed by the end of the calendar year.
Right.
And I said then, and I'll say now, that human nature being what it is, we have not moved, the agencies have not moved to do what they need to do with the regulations. That is, gather them, put them in the right language, according to what the legislative office wants, and then to have them published by notice as required by the APA. That makes staffing and funding difficult, because what's going to happen in the second half, probably the fourth quarter of the calendar year, is we're going to have a huge deluge of rules and whatnot that have to be put into regulation form and notice being sent out. So I am goading everyone, particularly the people in the law department, to get this going and get it set up and get it moving. And it's going to happen. We're going to do it. We're required to do it by your bill or ordinance, but it's going to be a tough second half of the calendar year.
Yeah, this is definitely what we want to avoid. I mean, the reason that the ordinance gave such a wide berth was in hope that the agencies who did have these things ready at hand and could turn over would do so promptly, so that that wouldn't be overlapping with the ones that would take a longer time to bring about. My recollection is that the planning department was already pretty good about their rules and regs, and that was an agency that we expected to hand over, to be, have the capacity to hand things over pretty promptly. And that there were maybe one or two other agencies that we could expect would get them. But you're saying basically, like, it's not flowing yet. We need to, and so is there additional funding in this budget for any of this assistance? You're looking for students needing internships to help out with these things, or what?
Well, we have enough to cover some temporary help to keep the paper flowing. But the work is going to have to be done, frankly, by the law department lawyers in the end of the day. And I have a meeting actually scheduled on Monday to get another update, but my recollection is only the Department of Transportation thus far has supplied us with rules that can be turned into regulations. So I will cajole and force, and what we'll have to do, I think, is set some interim deadlines and push people to the interim deadlines so that we can get a flow going. It's not going right now.
And are you getting support from this from the city administrator's office?
Yes.
Okay. How about you and I and the city administrator do a follow-up on this? I'd like to make sure that we're hitting the goal here. This was the last bill that I got passed last term. It was one that I had on reserve and had sought to do since my first year in office. So I was really glad to get it in before the end of the term. I want to see it, not a grueling experience for everybody.
I'll take any help we can get. I don't mind grueling. I just want it to be successful.
Great. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thanks. As a follow-up to my other question about, anybody in your office that works directly with people in the community also speak other languages? So we want to try to get more people in the staff that are speaking other languages.
Yes.
So you do have some?
I don't think we currently do. We're understaffed in almost every respect, and I suspect that as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
I think Spanish is the most obvious hole. So my approach would be to fill the obvious ones first and then work for a better solution for all that don't speak English.
Okay, great, thanks. And then on the, this is not my field, but I'll go ahead and ask it if no one else is asking it. The legal affairs piece with the police. It looks like you've been you're obviously going towards settlements of all of the cases with the gun trace task force and whatever else comes up. How's that going? Are we almost done? And I don't know if you can talk about that actually. So I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But I just want to get a sense of like where things are, and also I didn't see anywhere in the budget where that money is that we used to pay out those settlements.
So I'll answer the questions, and of course, Solicitor Shea can add when necessary. So we have about 10 open cases concerning the GTTF, and it's a combination of active cases versus new claims. And the attorneys are doing a great job in resolving those particular matters. There were over 30 plus cases, if you may recall, regarding the GTTF cases related to the question that you're asking today. And so and I guess a lack of loose words is chugging along. The attorneys are really assessing the liability as to whether settlement versus litigating these issues. And as the statute of limitations run on these cases, we'll be able to come to a conclusion that these are the remaining cases that will be left. Right now, we have some cases that are pending. We're just waiting for the claims to be finalized to determine how to move forward in litigation. We have 3 that are active right now, hope to resolve through some the great work of the attorneys responding to filing motions for summary judgment or motions to dismiss. And so with those particular cases, we'll be able to reduce some of our liability that the city may be affected. But I don't want to be too brash to say that the city is still on the hook for a lot of these cases. So we have to be very cognizant and prudent, and as we litigate these cases moving forward.
Yeah, I think the Deputy Solicitor captured with those last few words the caution that we have to approach this with. We have resolved, I believe it's 29 matters, and there are a handful left that are pending in the courts. And then there are a couple that we know are in the nature of a claim that they've got a lawyer, they've filed a letter informally with us, and we expect or believe that that may turn into a case. So there are a handful of those. The great imponderable is how many more out there that are neither pending cases nor noted claims at this point. And we have a couple things that are working in our favor. The passage of time, which bedevils most of us, actually helps here because the statute of limitations is running, particularly on certain types of these claims. The false arrest claims, for example, will fall to the statute of limitations. It's been more than 3 years since this publicity broke. So we don't know what we don't know, but there is some reason to hope, at least, that that tiny dot at the end of the tunnel is actually the sun and not a train coming at us.
Councilwoman, this is Bob Senemy. You had asked about funding source and see it in the budget. There's a program in the budget. It's called Mayoralty Related Self-Insurance Fund. And so all of the contributions that the city makes into what we call our risk management fund for potential future liabilities comes out of that program. We don't have like a hearing for it per se. I do talk about that when I talk about fixed cost and some of my overview information, things that we have to pay each year in order to keep up with the pace of liabilities. And so we have each year we get a list from the law department that they compile of all the outstanding cases. And sometimes those are in the early stages. We don't have a great idea of liability. Sometimes they're later in the process. We might have a guess. And then there's a risk management actuary that actually assesses the city's risks and helps us to determine how much we should put into the risk management fund based on those risks. So we've been doing that. I mean, it hasn't been something that's come up very often, but we have made increased contributions over the last couple of years into that fund based on the exposure that we felt that we had with these cases. But like, the solicitor said, we're seeing, we think, a light at the end of the tunnel that some of those could be winding down.
Can you tell me where it is in the budget book?
Yeah, it's in volume 2. It's page 156. So it's called Mayor Related Self-Insurance Fund.
Okay. I was
And
wondering what
again,
this was.
that's a contribution into the fund. And so the reason we send that into a separate fund is because those judgments can be, they're hard to predict, right? So we could break the general fund if we tried to guess and budget for that. So we send the money into a separate fund and we use those funds to pay down those costs when they arise. There
So
are years that
there's already money in that fund. You're just contributing to it.
yes, we contribute each year to it.
And then this is part of our fixed costs. You went ahead and just put it in fixed costs.
Yeah, I consider it, for purposes of looking at the budget overall, I consider it a fixed cost and that we have to make those contributions. It doesn't mean that the city can't influence it and do better. I think on all of our fixed costs, things like, pension cost, health benefits, risk, there are things the city can influence in the long term to bring those costs under control. But in the short term for the budget year, I can't not make those contributions because we
Sure.
could be leaving the city with an unfunded liability that could put us at risk. So that's why we include it under fixed.
Bob,
So
I'm sorry, Councilwoman. Bob, what is the balance of that fund presently?
So I don't have that in front of me. We actually have a sub account for different types of risks. One is general, what I would call more general liability, like the things we're talking about here. We also have, property damage liability accounts. We have auto liability accounts when the city's vehicles cause damage. There's workers' compensation, of course, is a big one, and that one's allocated to agency budget. So, I mean, we could, it's in the city's CAFR. We could pull that as a follow-up and show you what the balances are. And they do go negative from time to time. If we get a big unplanned claim in a certain year, we do go sometimes negative in those accounts, and then we have to make up for that over the next couple of years. There's other times we have balances there because we over contribute, and then the risk ends up being lower. We don't see many claims.
Great. So let's make a request for that to get the balances of the various liability funds.
Nina's got it.
Councilwoman Ramos, I have some other questions, but it sounded like you were still kind of in the middle of a follow-up. I interrupted.
No, that it was in the sort of same vein where you were going. Just sort of looking at this activity. I know we're out of law right now and into this, but just for a second. So this is the fund, Bob, that all of our other claims are paid out of in terms of even when people have basement backups and that kind of thing?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part.
Even so, any claim that somebody makes against the city, including like basement backups that they have to, or pipes burst in the house, that's the city's responsibility. What comes out of this one of these activities in the self-insurance fund?
Yes, and we do allocate the costs to the appropriate fund in those cases. So earlier, folks were talking about, well, what if it's a water or wastewater issue? The utilities do pay into that fund as well if there are claims that are specific to the utility.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yep.
To look at it the other way, not our liabilities, but our ability to recover assets. We don't do particularly well in that arena. I've brought this up the last couple of days, referring to damages to streetlights. I got some numbers from DOT staff a couple months ago on damages to streetlights. They gave me kind of the spreadsheet of the costs for the parts for the 3 different size light poles that we use, the different types of arm or the globe head, and so what all those part costs are, and then they don't track their costs for labor per light for replacement, for removal of a light that's been knocked down, and then the installation of the new light. But BGE does a lot of that work, and as it turns out, BGE has a line item for what they charge the city for labor for that. If you total the average for a pole replacement, and then you look at the number of poles, because I got that number, the number of poles that the city's had to replace, primarily almost exclusively from being hit by motor vehicles, we're incurring $2.25 million in damages every year just on streetlights. Streetlights alone. In 2018, it's based on my calculations again, so it's not perfect, but I think it's pretty accurate. In 2018, it was 1.7 million. In 2019, it was 2.7 million. In 2020, 2.4 million. We don't have full cost recovery numbers for all of those years, but this was provided to me from the law department in March of this year. In 2017, all fixed objects, that's not just street lights, but that's street signs, guardrails, signs in front of buildings or building walls, literally anything that is affixed to the ground, not a vehicle being hit by another vehicle. Our total recovery of fixed objects in 2017 was $28,000. Our total recovery for fixed objects in 2018 was $40,595.18. That amount doesn't even sound like it's worth employing a person to go after. Have we done any sort of fiscal analysis of whether it's even worth trying to go after this money? We probably spend more than that just to pay our lawyer to go after the money. I'm asking this question because it seems almost a foregone conclusion to ask whether we could be recovering more money. I think that if we could recover more of that money, we probably would, but at this rate, we're recovering less than 1% of the cost of damages, it sounds like. Jim, are you muted? Yeah, your mic's not on.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, before I go to you, I want to acknowledge Councilman Bullock. Thank you, Marguerite. Thank you, Councilman Bullock has joined us here in the chambers. Thank you.
Well, what you bring up does cry out for a cost-benefit analysis, which we will do. I'm not aware that we've ever done that, but we certainly can do that. I question the recovery cost because the way you generally would recover costs like that would be through a subrogation claim of some sort. And you'd have to be able to ferret into those claims and figure out what portion came from some fixtures that the city owned. To me, that would be a very difficult assessment. Well, most of the time on automobile recoveries, you recover through insurance, which would require a subrogation claim for property damage in a good number of instances. It's a good area because there is insurance that every motorist has. It's one of the problems you'd have in trying to collect small damage awards from individuals is many of them would be judgment proof, but here there should be insurance. But when you collect on that kind of insurance claim, you collect on a lot of things other than city light poles. You collect on other damage that's done. You could collect on bodily injury. There are a lot of other things. So figure out what portion of those recoveries actually came from light poles would be very difficult. That doesn't answer your question, which is, are we pursuing damages to city property generally as effectively as we can or should? And that I can't answer. That would require a careful cost-benefit analysis. But I encourage you not to focus in on such specific items as light poles. You're not going to be able to find out how much of that we recover. You can find out generally how much we recover in a particular area, and we'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, I use the example of light poles to say, if you total the cost of the value of the damages to that one item alone, $2.25 million every year, and that makes up only a portion of all fixed objects. And for all fixed objects, we only recovered $40,000. I have to imagine that maybe only half of that is light poles, which gets me down to less than 1%.
Well, like I say, you don't really know how much is being
Yeah.
recovered, but it's city property that it's property damage to
Yeah.
city-owned property. That's what we want to find out.
Yeah, and I mean, I respect and understand that the challenge here, in large part, is that a lot of these damages are being done by drivers who flee the scene, and you know, we probably recover much more readily on the ones where the driver is right there at the scene and we can go after their insurance. But the bulk of the loss is, I think, on these other ones where we don't know who it was and there isn't some, you know, police investigation that results in
Yeah.
figuring out who it was.
Well, the other solution that we should look at is buying insurance of our own to cover us for it. The insurance company then would have an enormous incentive itself to go after the damages, and we'd be able to recover in instances where the driver has fled. So we'll factor that in as well.
I think that would be a really swell thing to see. I mean, we're taking a huge hit, as far as I can tell, on these damages that we're not seeing, and that means that. And I use this as an example yet last night with DOT. If we spent as much on traffic calming in 1 year as the amount of the damages that we incur every single year over time, what would our savings be if we made the environment safer so that fewer people were crashing into light poles and things in the first place? I think we'd see a significant savings, and so there needs to be a cost benefit return on investment analysis in that arena as well. So I look forward to following up on this with you. Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos, did you have any other questions? Your hand is no longer up. Okay, I'll go one more time. Any colleagues here have any other questions? Seeing none, this committee will recess until 2 o'clock when we will reconvene with the Comptroller's office. Thank you so much to the Law Department. Keep up the good work.